Welcome to another edition of the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. I'm Don Grothoff. Along with my wife Gina, we have a practice called Focused Healthy Family, helping families get past the behavior and anxiety issues naturally. We also produce the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, where we are advocates for our own family and others dealing with OCD and anxiety. In the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, we do interviews, provide resources, and information for treatment and support of OCD recovery. We also want to hear from you, your comments, and if you want to tell your story, we want to put it up on the podcast on our Stories from the OCD side.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Q Sciences. Don and I discovered that the supplements we were taking and giving to our children were not being absorbed properly. I was very excited when I found Q Sciences. I was impressed with the quality of the products and that they provide maximum absorption. They have a variety of products, including a Q Max product, which is a combination of 3 products, including vitamins, minerals, and a probiotic. They also have hemp oil, a vitamin B12 spray, a sleep spray, and kids products. I've really seen a difference in how these products are improving how I feel, improving my mental health, and I'm happy with the quality of these products and how they're helping our whole family. If you'd like to learn more,
simply go to qsciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. That's the letter Q, sciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com, or visit invisiblewheelchair.com and find out more information there.
and stop throwing your money away on supplements that don't work and use a quality product like Q Sciences.
Now, let's get to that podcast. Well, welcome to the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. Today I'm doing an off-the-cuff podcast that I wanted to do for the fact that school's opening. A lot of kids are going back to school. Some are going back to school at home, which is another whole stress factor. So I wanted to give some tips on ideas that you can do to help a child, to calm a child, to help them get through their anxiety, to help them to be able to really study better, to be able to really get better academically, to be able to think clearly, all of that. So these are some tips. Now I'm going to mix quite a few things here. Now you might hear some papers ruffling because some of this I'm taking off of articles that I've actually got that I have been saving for some time for different things. And so, but I wanted to give credit to some of the websites that I'm coming from, and also to my wife who does a lot of this too. But some of this reference comes from www.adaa.org. Another part of it comes from worrywisekids.org, and then we're going to talk about proprioceptive input and the importance of it from specialisms.com. So I wanted to put out credit to those places that these articles come from so that you know that I'm not plagiarizing them. I'm just getting this information out because I think it's important. Like I say, especially now with school starting, kids are going to be getting a little more anxious with the COVID and this new Delta virus. You know, it's going to be a little more nervous, I think, at school having to do things. So first I want to give you some tips for parents and caregivers when it's talking about school. And first I'm just going to read this top ones that say, first of all, pay attention to your child's feelings. Don't discount their feelings. I know this from what we teach in our parent communication courses that my wife and I do through Focused Healthy Family. It's really important to listen to kids' feelings, to be able to be quiet and let them speak, using some simple responses like, wow, you're really upset, and then being quiet and letting them talk. Sometimes it's just a matter of letting them getting those feelings out. It doesn't need to be fixed, doesn't need to be repaired or solved or any of that. Second, stay calm when your child becomes anxious. I think that's really important, that you're not in the same place that they are in their anxiety or their anxiousness. So if you can keep your level calm into it, the other side doesn't rise up that much. Recognize praise and small accomplishments. So really work on their, and one of the things it talks about later is building on a child's personal strength, not on the things they miss, but look, even if they're going through something and they're dealing with it, you look at the fact that they're dealing with it somehow, some way, as a positive. So don't punish mistakes or lack of progress. Really be careful about them getting maybe a poor grade in something. Instead, just say, wow, I see. Does that feel comfortable to you getting that? Is that what went on with it? I wouldn't question too heavily, but just wow, do you want to talk about that? Be flexible and try to maintain a normal routine. Routines can be good. Waking up at the same time, going to bed at the same time, or roughly anyway, but not beating yourself up when one day you don't follow it. Be flexible and try to maintain normal routine. I just said that one. I don't know why I repeated it. Modify expectations during stressful periods. Yeah, I think that the idea there is the flexibility. Being flexible to bend and shift. If it doesn't go quite the way you want, then be able to shift yourself to be able to adapt to that change. Not get upset, not get mad, but be able to flex. And know if something doesn't get done a certain way, a certain time, it's not the end of the world. And plan for this transition. Plan for what the expectations are for it, what's going to happen, how you think it's going to go down. And they talk about too later on in this article, they talk about kind of role playing what's going to happen, what are the different outcomes that could come or the responses that could come from this or that happening, and how do you manage through that? Look at all aspects of how it's going to happen. Make sure to kind of leave extra time in the morning. Get up just a little earlier, especially first days, first weeks even. So, but setting expectations, and if you have a child that's especially anxious, you want to set the same expectations that you have for other kids, but just expect it to go at a slower pace, and that it's going to involve a lot more attention from your part. And like I said, role play out some of the things that are going to happen, the situations that are going to, in the article it talks about just role playing difficult situations. I think that's very good, but I think it doesn't hurt to role play situations that could come up, whether they're difficult or not, good or bad. How do you handle a good situation? If they're a kind of child that when they get excited and happy over something, they scream and yell and run around, that may not be appropriate for school, and they need to just understand, but do it in a compassionate way, not a judgmental way, but in a way of saying, wow, I know how excited you get when you get some good things happen, and you love to jump and scream and all that good stuff, which is so much fun. And here's where a big part of this, do not use the word but. Use something like the problem is, or as I see it. So, you're talking to them. I know you get really excited when good things happen. I do too. I love to jump around. The problem is, or as I see it, when you're in school, they don't have as much tolerance for that, or they don't do that as much. So you might be able, let's find a way that you can handle that excitement in a way that fits better for school, or maybe you could hold all the excitement and come home. When you come home, we have a jump around, happy, jump on the bed, pillow fight kind of way of handling it, So that expectations are really important. And they also talk about, as I talked about, is really focusing on the child's strength versus the things he did wrong. Here's another part, being independent. Independent doesn't, I like to make sure we understand that independence doesn't mean separation. Independence means a child learning through your guidance on how to do things on their own. And it's tough as a parent because it takes patience, teaching them how to tie their shoes. You just want to get in there and get it done because time constraint. Well, here again, what you might want to do with those kind of things is when they don't have to go to school, when they don't have the pressure of time on them, practice things that they do, that they want to learn. Because you really want them to be able to make their own decisions, to be able to solve their own problems in the long run. Because here's a thought for you with that. You really want to give your child that independence, that ability to think for themselves, to solve problems for themselves, to be able to find answers for themselves. Because here's the situation my wife and I like to talk about in dealing with this. If they do everything because you tell them to do it, if everything has to be done because you tell them or somebody else tells them, later on when they get into peer groups, are they just going to follow the leader and do some things that may not be appropriate or good for them? Are they going to be able to make their own decisions and say, wow, I know that's not a good thing, I'm not going to do that? So something to think about in really working with making your child independent, not separated. I think a lot of people think making a child independent means that that you have to separate them from you, even at a very extremely young age. So they talk about helping a child dealing with their own feelings, letting them know that it's good to feel their feelings. Don't try to smush their feelings down. Oh, don't be so sad, or don't be so mad. Sorry, excuse me, I forgot to turn my phone off. I will turn it off in a second here after that phone call goes away. It's a spam risk, can you imagine that? So I teach this in what I do. My wife and I teach it in what we do with parents. The fact of being able to let them really express and understand and learn how to manage their feelings. That their feelings are important, that their feelings are something that's real. I know for myself, not that my family was terrible at this, but I grew up in an era when you didn't deal with feelings. You pushed them down, you smushed them down, you shut them down. You didn't talk about feelings. Like I said, my family was not real harsh on that, but it wasn't huge. We weren't big, feely, touchy necessarily. But my parents were very loving and the caring and hugging and all that. But it wasn't extreme or anything like that. Yet it's very important, I think. So they talk about in this of working together as parents, as a couple. And this is where I think it's important too, that you don't want two extremes. You don't want one parent that's too easy and gets away with everything, and the other parent is extremely harsh, the military one or whatever. You really want to sit down with each other, away from the kids, and talk about your own expectations for how you want to raise the kids, and make sure that you listen to each. You almost do it in a brainstorming way, and where you listen to each and then talk about that each of those work for you. Your spouse tells you what they feel like, how they see the expectations for their kids. You tell without any kind of judgment. You just lay it all out, and then you go back over it. It's like problem solving, really, more than brainstorming, but problem solving mixed with brainstorming. And then work through, well, I see that you want to do it this way, to your spouse. And the problem is I don't see it quite that way. Where can we come to a middle ground? Where can we come to a compromise, an expectation for both of us? They talk about in here consequences, and that's a tough one, because you got to understand consequences are not punishments. A lot of times we like to call them like natural consequences. You know, if you leave home without a coat in the middle of winter, you might be cold, and you won't have a coat there to keep you warm. And handling it like that versus put a coat on because I said so, you know, that too does not work in dealing with this. And then the last thing, and this is big, that this talks about it in this article, but we also, one of the reasons again that we talked about calling our practice Focused Healthy Family is we realized ourselves in dealing with 2 kids with really high anxiety, it affects the whole family. So it's really talking, not just dealing with all of these things we just talked about with the one child who has the anxiety or most of the anxiety or the toughest thing or the disorder or whatever it is. It's also talking and going through each one of these with the other kids too. Making sure, you know, things like, well, one, making sure that they're not name calling or making fun of the other person because they can't quite keep up, or that they do things differently. And the other part is really making sure that you're validating the other kids' feelings just as much, listening to their feelings, getting their expectations down, helping them. It's easy, I know. I shouldn't say it's easy. It's really hard, but easy, I guess, the child with special needs, the child that has a high anxiety, tends to demand time from the parents. And so it's difficult. So it really takes some time to find time for the others in the family, and making sure that you're trying to hit their needs, letting them know that, hey, I understand that you really need this. The problem is, or as I see it, I'm getting pulled a lot by this other child because they have some issues. So I'm really going to try to do my best to pay attention to you also, but understand that I do have some issues with my other child that I need to address. So, you know, finding some time for them as much. Now the second part of that's some of the basic ideas of how to kind of keep things calm. One other one I'll mention to you is doing the tapping work, the EFT tapping, and that's something that I'm a practitioner of. And of course, now I'm going to be bold here, but I'm going to say that I can help you with that. You can contact me on if you feel like the EFT, the tapping process, which is a very wonderful calming thing that children love, the adults love, for helping calming anxiety and changing anxiety. And also I'll mention, here's a shameless plug, but I will mention the fact that my wife and I do a parenting communication workshop, or classes really. They're 6-week classes based on the book How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. And as this one's coming out, our next one is August 22nd of 2021 and September 13th of 2021. If you're listening in the future, just check our website, focusedhealthyfamily.com, for the workshops that we're doing. But that's something that really, we found that communication and what we teach in this communication course not only helps communication, but it brings down anxiety and it changes behaviors. It's amazing to watch. We watch our families that go through this, and they, fall into this, and it really helps to change it. We see results within 2 weeks of these classes. Now, the other part of this that I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to go through kind of quickly, but it's something my wife is an occupational therapist, and she does this all the time with the kids, is it's proprioceptive input that helps to calm a child. Proprioceptive input is, well, let me read the definition I have here, and then I'll kind of try to put it in a little simpler terms, I guess. But proprioceptive system is an input received through receptors in joints and muscles with movement and heavy work. When these receptors are activated, body awareness is improved, and the person knows where his or her body is in space. Children who tend to crave proprioceptive input, says, may overstuff their mouth with food, tend to give hard high fives, color with so much pressure the crayon breaks, or they tend to crash into things. Now the other side of that, other children, may hold their pencil lightly. It's really about sensitivities and touch. I think. They may have poor body awareness and bump into things, or have low tolerance for pain and cry out. Kids that are sensitive to like collars or labels on the back of their shirt. When your child appears to be craving proprioceptive input, provide them with some heavy work activities and combine other types of input. And I'm going to go through, and this again is from the special-isms.com website. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly, but first is carrying heavy items. Like my wife I remember with our daughter who was very anxious, like when they went grocery shopping, she'd be running around the store, knocking things over or whatever. And what my wife would do she would have her, hey, can you go, and she would have her go grab like the laundry detergent, which is heavy, but not too heavy. I mean, you don't want to break their back, but you want something heavy, not something light. And she would have her grab that and carry it around, and it would calm her system down. So isometrics, like push-ups against the wall. One that you may want to think about is my wife used to do wheelbarrow with kids. In other words, what you do, and this is very proprioceptive good input, is in other words, they lay down like face down. They do like a push-up and hold themselves up with their using their palm of their hand on the floor. Imagine them doing a push-up, and then you pick up their back legs like a wheelbarrow, and you walk them around on their palms of their hands, and it's wonderful for calming them down. She also, the other thing, and I think it talks about it. I'll talk about it in a minute. You do an animal walk, and that's what I was just kind of talking about there. That was a wheelbarrow, but crab crawl, bear crawl, army crawl, crab walk. I mean, not crab crawl. Heavy blankets. There are weighted blankets. We have one here for our dogs. It also works for dogs, but a heavy blanket, something with a lot of feel to it. Many instances, kids can really calm down just by sitting under or laying under a heavy blanket. Another thought for you kind of falls into that. My wife used to, I love this. Again, this is her occupational therapist side of her, but she would wrap them up in a blanket. She used to call it, let's do burrito. And she would put the kids and wrap them up in a blanket or in a towel or something like that, real kind of tight, kind of like being in the womb again, I guess. But it was very comforting. So these are, again, things to calm down. Swimming is a big one. Using the pressure against the waves as you swim, that force against you. Well, here they talk about Johnny Sandwich, and I think that's what we just talked about with the burrito. Where you kind of squish their arms, squish their legs. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Lifting, like we just talked about. Lifting something that has a little weight to it. Be cautious about making sure it's appropriate, that they can handle it, but that it's heavier than like just normal things. Making them touch and feel, like, in the classroom, having them erase the chalkboard, or wash the dry eraser board, clean things, touching things, rubbing, running across things, weighted backpack, something, again, heavy on their body. Giving them something to kick. Now, I'm not talking about another person or something that would hurt their feet, but if you know what a TheraBand is, a stretch band, what we do here, even at the house, is, and I think you can actually buy specific things for this, but you take on the legs of a chair and you run a TheraBand across and tie it on both legs so that they can use that and stretch and kick against that, or kick back on it or forward on it, either way, and stretch it. Really works. Pushing something, like in the shopping, pushing the cart when you're shopping, pushing a stroller, different things that you can push. Bean bags they talk about bean bags in the classroom, or bean bags in their room at home. It has a lot of, it puts some pressure against them, surrounds them somewhat, gives them that comforted feeling. They talk about pinching here, and I think what they mean is just putting some pressure, tight pressure, not forcefully pinching where it hurts necessarily, but just giving some, a lot of times it talks about gripping their arms and just putting some and counting to like 7 and going up an arm, wrapping your fingers around their arm, usually on the top is the best, and going up and systematically going up the arm with pressure, kind of like gripping it, really can help to do calming, doing these things like that. Another one this is off the cuff, this is really off the cuff, it's not on the article, but something that we learned and my wife learned, is you take, starting with their pinky finger extended out, starting at the end of the pinky finger by the fingernail, you grip with the thumb and the first 2 fingers, kind of the thumb underneath the finger and the 2 fingers on top, and you do like an inchworm kind of crawl down each finger to where you get to the palm of the hand, and then still hold, and putting some light pressure on it as you crawl down the finger, and then you don't take once you get down to the palm, you don't take the fingers away, but you keep pressure on it and slide it back off, all the way off to the fingernail, off the finger, and you go down each finger like that. Kind of do like a caterpillar crawl down each finger with those 3 fingers. Before you take it off, you slide it back off, holding on to the pressure of those fingers as you do. And you go down each finger on both hands, starting with the pinky, heading towards the thumb. That's a really good calming method. One last one I'll mention is, there is a spot, now again, I talk about the tapping. Outside the tapping points, there is a soft spot between the shoulder blade and the collarbone. It's kind of a they call it, in my practice, they call it the sore spot, but it's a tender spot that if you put a little extra pressure on it, it'll be a little sore, I guess would be the way. That it's not extremely painful, but if you just take that and gently rub that little spot, that little soft spot between shoulder blade, the shoulder and the collarbone, you can rub that one. It's a very calming spot. And what I would suggest on any of these is you do it first, and that can get them excited about wanting to do it too. Instead of forcing them to do it, you do it first. Show them, hey, when they're starting to get anxious, go, something I do for myself is, and you use one of these different things. What do you think? What if you try that and see if that helps you? So you approach it a little differently, because sometimes you tell, let's do this. They'll go, oh, I don't want to do that, versus if you do it and then you go, and you use that terminology of saying something like, when I get into this place, I do this. You think you could do that? So those are some ideas for parents, for teachers, whatever. And again, I'll remind you, one thing I would really suggest is checking out our focusedhealthyfamily.com for our parent communication workshops, because that is communication between a teacher and a child, a parent and a child, can make a world of difference. And what we always say is, which would you rather have, a 15-minute conversation or an hour-long battle that gets you nowhere? And these communication workshops can get you to that place. So I hope this helps you out. Good luck at school for you as the parent and you as the kids. I hope it can be a really good one for you. So take care. And like I said, if I can help you out with the tapping or with these communication workshops, make sure to just check us out at focusedhealthyfamily.com. And again, thank you for visiting the Invisible Wheelchair podcast. And let us know what we can do with this. Leave us a comment on invisiblewheelchair.com. Take care. This concludes this podcast. We hope you will subscribe if you haven't already. Remember, we would love your comments, or if you have a story to tell, we want to put it up on the podcast. Simply go to invisiblewheelchair.com to do that. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest, we love guests. So simply go to invisiblewheelchair.com and contact us from there. Gina and I are here to help you or your family get to a better place naturally. Simply visit focusedhealthyfamily.com for more information. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Keep tapping and focusing forward for a better way.